Well, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Today I have a bit of a croaky voice. That could be rather unfortunate. It could impact the understandability of my talk. And I actually very often have a croaky voice. And most of the time it's because I didn't sleep well. Well, and I'm from Amsterdam here by train, so I'm staying in a hotel. And you know how it is, then nothing is right. It's warm weather, so the temperature is too high in the room. I like it at 15, 16 degrees. Could be noisy. Well, luckily it wasn't in this hotel. And then the bed, of course, maybe it's not very solid and I'm not a very small person, so it starts to sag. Or the mattress could be too soft. And don't make me start about the pillow. I mean, even my own pillow at home is still not right. So, what am I doing? I completely forgot. I just dive into the subject without properly introducing myself. Well, and indeed, who of you thinks that having a question as the title of your talk, that it's a bit silly? I will give you a hint. I think it's silly. Because you already know the answer, right? Because if I would say, if it doesn't work, I'm here. So you're quite right, that's it. No, it's not a conflict of interest, it works. But it's a bit of a word pun. Well, I'm Edo Poll. I'm from Amsterdam. I work for Xibia. Yesterday, my colleague Kenny Baas, we call him nowadays Kenny de Baas, because that's what he is in DDD. I work for Xibia in the Netherlands, a consultancy company. I'm from Xibia IT Architects, and I don't put something like IT or any other kind of architect in my signature. I'm a consultant in architecture. I help clients with doing architecture, and preferably in a more modern way, my way. Within our unit, we have a couple of colleagues, and we are the practice Agile Architecture, which is quite funny because I don't like hypes, and IT is a bit of a hype-driven industry. I think it's a troubled industry, and we try to solve that with the next silver bullet. So I was quite reluctant for a while to call it Agile Architecture. But then it was the Open Group. 2 years ago, they published their new framework, Open Group Agile Architecture. And then I was like, well, even if they start calling it Agile Architecture, then I have to. I mean, I'm late to the game. Anyways, about Agile. So I already told you, I'm into architecture, IT architecture. Start with software architecture, do also software enterprise architecture, solution architecture. And Agile, we got this card. They asked me, did you already cross? So let's cross it off. Like, yeah, but it doesn't say Agile, it says Agilist. To me, it sounds like evangelist. So I hope you can forgive me being an architect. So maybe my knowledge of Agile is 7 years old or something. But I also wrote down, I was born Agile. In my family, it's a family trait. We're makers. I like to make stuff. And you start it when you're young. And people who are makers, then first of all, you make one-offs. And secondly, well, just for fun, just because you can, you try to build nice things, complex things. And then from a young age, you learn that there are certain things that are very important to do that. And they're actually fundamental to Agile. So I took the movie scene. Originally said, are you ready? Yeah, I was born ready. And I always make the joke, like, ask me if I'm Agile. I was born Agile. And this joke is, for me, is an expression of a couple of big frustrations I have, but that's not for today. Well, at first, I think we're at a conference here, and I think there are a lot of different ideas on what architecture is in IT or what it should be, and that's fine. But I would like to start very quickly just to tell you what we're talking about. Because my story won't make sense if I don't base it on this is what I think architecture is. And you can have another idea of what it is, that's fine. That's good discussions. I already told you I'm within the practice of Agile Architecture. And that's about two things. That is about the way you practice architecture, with an agile mindset. And it's also about designing or creating agile systems. The open group already had. So let's start what's architecture. For me, I make it quite simple. Architecture is a form of design. It's the design of a structure, of the structure of systems. And in architecture, my statement is that quality attributes of the system are much more important to the architecture than the functions. And architecture then supports further design. We have the UX of a system. Well, most, not really architecture, maybe some aspects. So it's a design discipline. It's a form of design, but not all design is architecture. And design is actually more generic. It's creating the plan of the construction of something. I want to build a car. I have a design for a car. Actually, it's a plan. It states this is how the car should look like. This is how you're going to build it. Another thing is very important is that, well, you have the distinction between implicit and explicit architecture. And what I mean to say with that is that you always have architecture. That's something you talk about. I mean, the house of a snail has an architecture. But unless you have that belief, there's no designer of that snail house. So, and one thing one statement I like, one quote is, the alternative to good design is bad design, not no design at all. So, don't come to me saying, well, we have no time for design. That's your risk, that's on you. What's agile? Here I need some forgiveness of the audience. I really like my colleague, we also do a lot with domain-driven design. For us, that's a very important part of architecture. And then you also are focusing on language. What do things mean? To make sure that we understand each other, that we work with the same shared understanding. And what I very often do, I take a dictionary of words. So everybody's talking agile, and then I just take the dictionary. And there it says, it is the ability to move with quick and easy grace. Or the other one I really like, having a quick, resourceful and adaptable character, an agile mind. So you can see the two things are part of agile. It is that you want to be agile, that is when you have agency, it's your intent. So you sense and then you adapt in order to achieve your goal. And it's the ability to be agile. So you sense and you adapt. So I come back on what for me agile means. It's not only the mindset and a way of working, but it's also a property, a quality of systems. Now, when we have a conference, Agile meets architecture, then I think like, okay, it's just a meeting of two persons where they know each other for half their life, or is it more like a date, First time and see if it's going to work out, or are we going to stick with one date, or is there some potential for a long-lasting relationship? So we have to ask ourselves, are they a match? Can they be a match? Or if they can be a match, when are they a match? So I have this is one of my favorite architects, real architects. I'm not a real architect, I work in IT, sorry. One of my frustrations. This is one of my favorite architects. There was this building and this big bow-like thingy. Is there anybody here who thinks that you can just first commission the building, build it, and then the client says, oh, but I want to have this big, iconic bowly thingy on top of it. Anybody? Remind me then. I would like to write your name down, and whenever you start building your own house, then you can invite me for a barbecue, but in your garden when the weather is nice. And the idea about when it's a good match, when you want to be agile in architecture, is in what situation are you? What do you know? Actually the building industry is rather conservative, because if things go wrong, then they go terribly wrong, and you can have loss of life and property. So that is the funny thing about our industry. We're not in the same phase. So we often have to deal with situations. We don't know everything. And our situations, the systems, the software systems we try to build are easily already too complex to know everything in advance. So we have to, and that's what the Kinefin framework is nice. They see, okay, we have a complex situation. We start to probe, maybe make a prototype and see what happens, and then we learn things. And then we can analyze that. And of course, then you have some people say, oh yeah, please, I want to have the prototype. So what's Agile Architecture? It's a practicing architecture with an Agile mindset. And you're open for change in a changing and Agile environment. Changing is the need for Agile architecture, and Agile environment is your adaptation. Look, if you have an environment that has an Agile mindset, that is Agile, then it's good if you practice architecture to adapt yourself to that. You create Agile systems. Those are systems that evolve to stay fit for purpose. That's an important word, purpose. We boiled it down to nothing very exciting. We boiled it down to 6 essentials and 7 characteristics, because I don't want to use the word principle. Very few people make a dogma out of it. And I think there was a good discussion in the morning about that. I'm talking about systems all the time. So to finish in, what are we talking about? Well, what is a system? Well, it can be very simple. Your system, your system, your system, your system. Anything can be a system. But the system is a collection of parts that are related, that interact to have aggregate behavior. And the system has a boundary, literally. There are things that are inside the system and things are outside the system. And the system has an environment that influences it and it interacts with the environment. And you describe a system very often in the structure of its part and of its function. And then what is quality finally? I mean, we could talk about how to have high quality software. But what is quality? Quality is actually the other main aspect of a function. It's the extent to which something excels in doing something. So for a system, it's the degree to which it performs its function as needed. So it's very important. It's kind of the extent, the degree to which a function performs, but only when you relate it to what is needed. Quality can be very tangible, but it can also be very intangible, like aesthetics. In building architecture, there's a very important quality, but we will see that the degree of tangibility makes how easy it is to work with quality. And that's to contrast it with a function. I've just a small example of part of ISO 25010. Well, these are the most important ones. And I think that a lot of people know these as non-functionals. Yes, I see people nodding. I had some psychology courses for my studies computer science because I was specializing in artificial intelligence. Don't worry, that was so long ago that you couldn't find any work in it. And from there, I learned what non-functional means. It means it doesn't work. So when you give me a couple of non-functional requirements, then you basically ask me, hey, can you find so many ways of making the system not work? So now you know. There is a good other word for these non-functional requirements. Those are requirements of quality attributes. So we'll see that later. I saw the word in quality attributes in a talk this morning. So I hope that slowly we're going to get rid of the word non-functional. Okay, let's zoom in on quality. Very important. Quality serves a purpose. Does it exist on? Well, it does exist on its own, but we won't talk about it. We will talk about what is the purpose, what goal do we want to achieve, and what system do I need in terms of what functions does it have, and what quality attributes does it need to have. So I like this one. That's the other way around. Like, I applied all patterns from the Art of Scalability. That's a book. We now have a high-performance system. Yeah, but what system are you talking about? Is this the payment processing system on which all the payment terminals in the retail sector are in the Netherlands? There's one organization that will handle all those payments. They have a system. Yeah, that's relevant. Or is this the system where every week they want me to do it? Every week I have to register what hours I work. And at the end of the month, a colleague from finance is starting to chase us. So what if this system doesn't work at the end of the month? Well, then he will tell the CFO, like, you have to wait another day for the report this month. You know, no big deal. So you really have to always think about what's the purpose. Quality serves a purpose. Quality has metrics. Actually, that's the way to talk about quality. So quality has a name, but if we really want to talk about it and discuss about it, we have to talk about the metrics. Please build me a high available system. How high is high? How much availability do you want? So we express quality in metrics, because if we don't, I can't know if the quality fits your need, if it serves the purpose. If I don't have a metric, I have no way of measuring or analyzing if my design is right or if the software system is built okay. And worst of all, I don't know if I need to apply tactics. That's how you achieve quality in your design. That can be very expensive. So I can't make these trade-offs, can't make decisions. Well, example of a metric. I also worked a lot inside reliability engineering in the architecture part. So I do a lot with availability and the other reliability quality attributes aside. So the metric for availability, one metric is the percentage of time the system is available for use. And then you can make a statement like, I need the system to be available 99.8% of the time. There are some more specifics, but that's not relevant now. But you see, this is a nice one because everybody can see it's easily quantifiable. We can actually measure it. That will be later. And quality can be specified, just like function requirements. It's actually not that hard to do. You have quality models like ISO 25010. I'm so old that it used to be 9626, something like that, and that's only 4, so it was 25010. So yeah, at least you have standard types of qualities, you have descriptions, then you can easily find suggestions for metrics, what metrics are there. And also, you should work outside in, not inside out. That was the last example. Like, don't go through all the quality attributes in ISO 25010 equality model, but turn it around. Which ones are relevant? Which one do you care about? And specify them in metrics that are somehow measurable. Note somehow. And it's up to you, if you are the software architect responsible for that, to discuss it with your client, what they need. And then you have to talk their business language. And we very often do that. For instance, for my client, talking about should your availability be 99.6 or 99.8%, it doesn't mean anything, or it doesn't mean much. But 99.8%, it translates to 17 hours a year. So they can ask, what if? You very often use what if scenarios. What if your payment app, your banking app is unavailable for 3 days a year? Well, that doesn't sound good. 17 hours? Can you go lower? Okay, 8. Then sit at 99.9, which is very high. And then we go on further because, okay, yeah, but I don't want to have this 8 hours at once. That's unacceptable. And when you describe them, and here I'm a bit out of the whole agile world, I once was told that the story format is for people who begin. And I love the story format for the simple reason that it says, SA, who, stakeholder, I need, what do you need, feature, so that and why. Because I really can't do my design, I really can't do talk about quality, see what metrics are, take all kinds of measures, measure them, what tactics do I need to use if I don't know why. So for me, the story format is very nice because it preserves the why and who needs what and why. Now, well, how can you design quality? How can you design it into your system? I like Software Architecture Praxis. It's already the 4th edition. It's from the Software Engineering Institute. And it's one of the few texts I know where it's really written down how you go about designing a system, because that's a very non-trivial, non-linear process. And what they do, they break it down and say, okay, you have function requirements, and you meet them. You do that with allocation responsibility. That's not relevant for now. And the other thing is that I find it very nice to say, okay, and quality attribute requirements, you address them with tactics. And tactics, I think that a lot of people will recognize some tactics as the good old software design patterns. And also very often they impact the structure of the system. So we're really here at the core of the work of software architecture. Some examples, availability, already did it. Well, availability is the degree to which a system is operational accessible when required for use. There are some metrics here, I already mentioned one. And then you get very specific metrics per quality. Certainly in this area, we have mean time between failure, mean time to recovery. We have a formula that you can use as a metric. And the little tree on the right side, there's just an organization of all available tactics. This is also from that book, of all available tactics that you can use to improve the availability of a system. And one of them, I can't point it out, it's on the second row, redundant spare. Well, everybody knows that. I just have 2 servers while I only need 1, hot standby, etc. So this is how it works. I hope that with these examples, I make it more specific, more concrete, more tangible. Another one, because that's less tangible, is usability. Degree to which a product can be used by specified users, blah, 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 in an efficient and satisfactory way. Oh, that's interesting, satisfactory, how I'm going to measure that. The thing is, you do your measurements can be at any time when possible. So you can have, as a metric, you can use the user rating of the ease of use. You can ask them on a scale of 5, how easy do you find our software to use? That's very subjective, but it's a measurement. I will get back to that later, soon actually. But you can measure the time you can actually log and measure the time they spend on their activities and completion of tasks. Another was modifiability, was already mentioned earlier. How much effort does it take to change my system? There's a whole lot of tactics. Now, finally, we get to our date. Quality meets Agile. This is almost 25 years ago. I was confronted with waterfall and I dismissed it right offhand. I was always refused to do it that way because I'm a maker. This is the fundamental flaw in waterfall. I know as a maker or as a craftsman or making software, I know what I know and also know what I don't know, and I also know that I cannot know it at that moment. And there's this quality is very hard to design up front. If you come to me and say, Edo, build me a system that's 99.8% available, there's no way, if it's refilled, no way for me to determine that, to analyze that. I can say, okay, is it an issue? Is it something you care about? Okay, so let's already start with the setup. What we do, we start measuring the actual availability over a period of time. And then we say, is it right or not? No, that's not right. Okay, then I'm going to apply more measures. Because software systems easily become too complex to be fully analyzable. Also, they're influenced by the environment. And the environment is a couple of orders of magnitude more complex. We can't analyze that. So that makes it very hard to do that. That's also the reason why it works very well in continuous improvement, feedback loop, being agile. What is your outcome you want to have? Sense, probe. When it's time for quality, well, fun thing is I just said big design up front is wrong anyway, if you have to tend to quality. But you can be too early, you can be too late with designing for quality. If you're too early, I might have too little information. I might not meet the key requirement. You can also have the other way around. It could be that you are going to gold plate it. Because at the beginning of your track, you think, oh, I have enough time, Go and make a beautiful system. I never understood what beautiful in software means from the inside. Waste. I made the decision too early. I have to revisit it later. Too little, too late. I'm too late. Very often it's architecture, so it could take time to implement the tactic. Then I have a hard choice. Am I going to delay the project? Or am I going to say, okay, I'm going to settle for a shortcut? The famous, it's only a temporary solution. And then as architect, you sometimes keep a backlog of technical debt. It only grows. Well, I think this is on the wrong place. So what you do when you have a system, you keep on monitoring it, also in production. You keep on collecting data. And of course, you collect the data you need for your metrics. You don't do that for reporting, for management. You do that for yourself, you as development team. Because, well, you have the metrics, you know what the requirements are, and then you want to have some production data. If a production run for 3 months, then they can see, is it performing like I want it to perform? I have an example. What we actually did with 2 colleagues, one of the largest insurers in the Netherlands, I keep it vague, they had a bit of a problem with reliability, and then and they managed it centrally, and we went into the service management system, and we did a desk study of all the major incidents. I think there were a couple of hundred. And then we thought that our main problem was decoupling, so we had 3 tactics for decoupling. And what we did as desk research say, what if these measures had been in place, what would have happened with this incident? And then we found that they had an actual of 99.3%. They want to have 99.7%, but if these measures would have been implemented the year before, they would have got a 99.6%. That's interesting, because if you do it like this, you can create a business case for quality. I call this super duper agile. If you're born agile like I am, I told you, don't have to believe me. People have a tendency to think sequentially. You want to make sense of the world around you. You structured it. And that's also a bit of a trap. And I always make the joke like a circle doesn't have an end, but it also doesn't have a beginning. And you can start anywhere you want. So you don't have to, in advance, it's good you need to know what quality you care about. You need to know what metrics there are for that quality, but you don't have to set an objective in advance, because sometimes it doesn't make sense. So what you can do is start in a do, and you start measuring. And then you have some data, and then you can make sense of the data, and then you can see like usability is maybe a nice example, because I collect the rating of my users and also just measure the time they need to complete the task. And then it can become that they complain. But then I have my measurement in time, and I know, okay, that's a metric. They complain, so probably it takes them too much time. I can implement tactics to improve the usability, and I can see that they work when the time to complete a task is getting little. Okay, quality or daily work. Because of the time, I use Scrum, not because I think Scrum is agile, but it's because it has a structure. It is a part about, okay, but how can you really incorporate it in your daily work very quickly. Well, write quality stories. Already mentioned that. It's a bit of a joke, but really do that. And use the metrics in the quality stories. Manage the backlog. There are two things to manage there. You get different type of things on the backlog. So maybe you can use the backlog coloring of Kruchten, because some things have visible value and some others don't. So a lot of stories for quality don't have much visibility, so they're actually yellow. So maybe it's good to color it, but at least think about it. Also, when you start with a new system, try not to do too much yellow in the beginning and very little green, like putting down some foundation, because then your client won't see a lot happening for a while. Use the demo to show the quality. Well, you cannot always demonstrate the quality, like availability, but you can very often demonstrate the tactic. Like if I have a redundant setup, then in a demo I can say, okay, here, this is a redundant setup. Now I'm killing one of the nodes, but it still keeps running. Then at least the client knows what you're doing with their money, you know? And of course, it's something that you discussed with them before. Retrospective, very often you only know that you're missing the mark because of complaints or issues or incidents. They have to relate them back, okay, there's a quality issue, what metrics are there? Definition of ready, quality needs to maintain. I mean, you can break it. So you should have like, okay, still have to check. We have to check the quality, or cross-functional concerns or cross-company concerns. You can code them into your definition of ready. And definition of done. I mean, if I have a quality story, is it specific? Are there metrics? And maybe even put a tactic you want to use there, because tactics can vary wildly in how expensive they are. I will skip this. What skills are needed for quality? Obviously something, stakeholder management, etc., etc. This is the conclusion. Well, quality and agile, they help each other. They can be good friends. Quality helps because it helps you in being very specific on what is needed, and it also makes it measurable. So I can have feedback loops, continuous improvement, and it helps you in talking with the different stakeholders in their language to get the priority right. And agile helps quality. It's outcome, it's goal oriented. Otherwise, I have no idea how to derive what quality are concerned and the metrics. I have a feedback loop. At least I hope so you have when you're working agile. Continuous improvement. You're open-minded to change. You know, you're open-minded to, I know more, I can adapt. When I have new data, new information, new insights, then I can put it back in my product or system. Alrighty, this is the QR code. Just hands up. Who doesn't have time? Who hears we don't have time for quality? It's a complaint I often get in trainings. Nobody here, everybody here has the luxury of having time to do it right at once and not do it over. Okay. Yep.
Let's thank you first.
Thank you.
So there are a lot of questions about the quality metrics, but the first question that came has an easy part and a difficult part. And the easy part is, how much documentation do you need in an agile architecture? And the difficult part is, please don't say it depends.
Sorry, can you repeat the easy part? There's one word I missed.
How much documentation do you need in an agile architecture? You can't say it depends.
Okay, this is a challenge. Can you say it depends without saying it depends? Well, what do you need? Actually, it's part of our practice. So we tell people, like, you document the things. It's a form of communication over time. You know, I now make design decisions. I apply certain tactics because I know this quality is needed now. And I write it down when I think, well, this could be tricky, and somebody else somewhere in the future is going to be responsible for modifying the system. And then it's good for them to know what tactic we do and why we did it. So it doesn't really depend. You document, but you only document what you need, and your criteria is for what's its purpose, who's going to need it when.
Right. So something completely different. What if the client can't come up with quality metric figures? Do you propose your own based on your experience?
Okay, so let me clarify that, because that's what I meant earlier. I think it's the job of the software architect or the whatever architect that you formulate the metrics. So you advise your client on, you question your client, you interview your client, you talk about the problem, about what they want to achieve. And as an architect, you design actually also what they need. And metrics are just one way of specifying a part of the system. It's very hard for a client to think in terms of availability in MTBF and MTTR. So you translate it for the client to, okay, how bad is it if? We call it service risk. At Google SRE, they call it service risk. So how bad is it if, what if, etc. And that's really the difficult part, the art you have to learn by doing it.
And that sort of leads to the next question. What arguments or what reasoning do you use to make the qualities more tangible to the non-technical or inexperienced stakeholders? How do you convince them that they matter?
By telling them what the impact is on their business process or their daily life or their use or their happiness or and here I'm in between. Like on the one hand, I'm also a very technical person, and on the other hand, I sometimes work for clients and I only work on the business side. And over many years, I've learned to speak their language. So that could be difficult, and you have to. But what you do is like you explain to them the consequences of choices. So you see what I tell my client, I can make decisions for you, and this is where you have to make a decision about. This is a choice you have to make. And then I tell what the options are, but I describe it mostly in what it means to them. What happens, how it impacts their work, their business. And you let them decide. So it like arguments sound to me like I have to convince my client. You know, I find it, I'm okay if I think that my client makes the wrong decision, and my job is to make sure that it was on the right information.
So how do you approach negotiating which qualities are most important when the client says everything is important?
Everything is important doesn't have any metric. So, and here we get a bit into your personality, how you approach things like that. Then they say, okay, I want 10 times more money. And okay, it's okay with you that I'm going to have a lot of fun. Don't laugh. It has happened. That you get a lot of money and you can have a lot of fun. So some people do have too much money. So if they don't have to formulate the metrics themselves, but again, then I will think, but you need to understand their business model, the business process. So when I'm working in another sector I'm not familiar with, it becomes very hard. So I am the one who has to think, okay, I think that this is important because I see what the impact is. And then I have to describe the options and the impact. And if they then still don't want to decide, and say, okay, are you okay with that? I will then, as architect, decide what I think that's best for you. But I will always put it like that. And some people want that, you know, they don't want to be bothered, and certainly when they trust you. But then if the other side is doing it right, they say, what would you advise me? And then you can give an advice.
That's it for the questions. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.